Okay, we'll call the Door County Board of Supervisors meeting to order for Tuesday, November 15th at approximately 9:35. We need the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call, please.
Exit out and go back in.
Okay, all 20 members are present, one excused. Next would be the reading of the land acknowledgement statement. I asked Supervisor Gauger if she would do that for us, please.
Door County, along with the lands our facilities and parks are located on, are the ancestral homelands of the Menominee Nation. Currently, there are 11 federally recognized Native American sovereign nations in Wisconsin. We acknowledge these indigenous communities who have stewarded this land throughout the generations and pay respect to their elders past and present.
Okay, thank you. Next would be the presentation of the agenda. We would need a motion to approve this agenda as presented. Motion by Enigal, a second by Shomo. Any questions, additions, corrections to that agenda? Hearing no indication, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries by voice vote. Okay, next we will actually recess for the annual Door County Fair meeting. So you can stay in your seats and the Fair Board will come up here and run the next portion of the meeting. Okay, we'll reconvene as the county board then and proceed with our regular agenda. Is there anything on correspondence? Ken? Okay, public comment. Anyone wishing to make a public comment for the regular portion of our meeting? No one online?
I will ask for those again online. If you dialed in, you can hit *9 and I can give you the floor to make a comment. Otherwise, those online, you can raise your hand and I also provide you the floor to provide comment. I will ask 2 additional times for any comments. For the first time, anyone who would like to make a comment? And for the second time, is there anyone who'd like to make a comment? Seeing none, we can proceed.
Okay, with no indication of public comment, we'll continue. Supervisor's response. There's be no response to the public comment. The approval of the minutes of October 25th, 2022 County Board meeting. There's a motion by Rubelard, a second by Thace. Any questions, concerns with those minutes? Okay, seeing no indication, all those in favor of approval of the minutes indicate by aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. The county administrator report on the 2022 accomplishments. Ken did some of that presentation prior to the public hearing. Are there any questions on those list of accomplishments or any additions? Nothing you wish to add to it? Okay. So this is an unusual agenda. Now I guess we adjourn as county board and convene into the annual budget session. So the administrator did some of the reporting on the budget as it was presented on our website. And it's now time to discuss those and raise any questions with what was presented. Hugh, did you have some question earlier when Ken was?
Sorry, do that. Thank you. Relative to that tax chart, Ken, where we just, show that real hockey stick. I think as we discussed at the budget session offsite, that tax revenue doesn't really take into account for inflation.
Yep.
And so from an inflation perspective, even though it may be high, you know, a lot of that is because of inflation has taken place. So it really is actually smaller when you look at it in an inflation adjusted basis. Is there a way when you do your 3-year that you look at inflation over the past 2 or 3 years and do it from an inflation adjusted perspective? Because the amount that you're going to spend the next year really has an impact of 8 or now, right, 7 to 8% or more. So you're really not getting the impact of those dollars that you visually see.
And that's actually a great point. And that's one of the things that we try to do in that, I guess, for that trend, when we look back at those 3 years, because we look at both the sales tax, but we are looking at some of the trends that we get from Wayne in terms of all the utilities, especially. We've been seeing some increases in that area. But then likewise, we also work with the highway in terms of our trending for fuel prices. So we do try to account for that. And that's why when we look at the 3-year trend, we're looking at, like you said, not only what we think the overall amount would be, but also what's the impact of, you can say, like the inflation or what I saw some of those indirect or those hidden costs in terms of that number. So yeah, I mean, that's what, so when it comes in high, it helps us a little bit because we're actually then accounting for some of that inflation in the following year's budget. But again, it's been, as you can see, that 1.9 is a lot higher. But again, if you take that amount, you know, how much of that is an inflationary number, that's where it's kind of hard to discern that amount, but we do try to at least have that discussion and account for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Roy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I had a lot of questions before, but our administrator answered them all for me. So thank you very much for doing a great job. My questions have been answered. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Vinny?
I have a question about one of the budget line items that's for the CIP and ARPA funding. And if you go to page 77 of the budget, which I'm going to do myself too quickly, looking back in the CIP from July 13th that was approved, it was 1.2 million for the address signs. And then going in further minutes, September 1st, we had our budget retreats, and then the amended budget on page 77 in red for CIP has the, let me just make sure I'm on the right page here. It's page 77 or page 80 of your packet here. The rural addressing goes from 600,000 other in total, as the funding source isn't listed, and then it goes to 1.2 million with $200,000 of the ARPA funding being used for that. So I guess it's a procedural question as well. Like, I would like to see that $200,000 not come from the ARPA funding. And it looks like on July 13th, we approved 1.2 million for that project with the resolution of, it says an updated resolution of 2022-76. So that funding's approved under CIP, but the source wasn't listed. And then the source is listed here as ARPA, as you see, 200,000 and undesignated fund of $1 million. So I guess I have not amended a budget before in this process, but I would like to know how it could go about moving that $200,000 source and not having that be an ARPA source, and instead having that be a undesignated fund source, which is what I thought was happening in July 13th when we approved the CIP spending.
Okay, yeah, if Ken could explain how. the
Sure,
process
let me,
will be.
let me do a two-phased answer. One is just the background, and then one is if you want to make a formal motion. So again, the rural addressing, for those that aren't familiar, again, we discussed it at the retreat. This has been a topic we've been working on for probably 3.5 years, at least, in terms of what to do with this project. It's been in the CIP, I think, 2 years in a row that it was not put in, and then from the administrator standpoint, I built it in because it was a known project, just because there was concern about who's actually going to do the project, but it's always been in one form or fashion. This past year, when we first started with the ARPA fundings, we actually identified about $800,000 of the ARPA funding to be used towards rural addressing. When we had some of those discussions, both at finance, but then also some of the concerns that we had, there was, I guess, some concern about using that much towards rural addressing. So in terms of a way to move this forward, I tried to strike a compromise. Again, I think some of the county board supports the idea of the rural addressing because they think it's a public safety concern and it's a priority for our residents and emergency services to make that happen. What happened in the first draft is a CIP. You'll actually see it as the supervisor mentioned, we had 600,000. What happened is we actually divided it up over 2 years of 600,000 and 600,000 to get the 1.2. When we had that discussion on that, there was concern about having that leg that long a time in terms of making that project come together and happen. So there was a recommendation to make that full amount in the fiscal year. In other words, instead of breaking over 2 years, do it in the 1 year. Also, as part of that, when we discussed it with finance, that's where we made the recommendation to reduce that the ARPA funding down to 200,000. In other words, we're trying to find that balance with the county board, showing that it's a valid use of the funds, but we'd like to use those funds for some other projects. And we took the remaining balance out of the undesignated reserve funds. So that's how everything came together. So it really is, I guess, in my mind, trying to build a compromise with the county board in terms of trying to reduce those dollars, but also still showing the importance from a public safety standpoint, from the desire of both public safety committee and also finance through their discussions. So that's where that was put together. To get to the second part of your question, if you would like to change that to be 100% or the 1.2, all of it out of the undesignated fund reserve, you would have to, when we get to the resolutions, you'd actually, resolution would come on the floor to accept resolution 2022-96. Then once it's on the floor, you'd make a motion to amend the budget. In this case, you'd make the motion to amend the budget to change the funding dollars to fully $1.2 million out of the undesignated fund reserve. And that the 200,000 then would just stay within the ARPA funding. In other words, we wouldn't allocate it to anything at this point in time until it goes back through the process of the finance committee, reviewing that and then making a recommendation to county board. So that'd be the second half of your question.
Thank you. And is there a spot in the budget where we can see the total on the undesignated fund account to see the impact that adding $200,000 for this project would have on that total?
Actually, what we'll do is while we're taking other questions, I will have Steve run the impact of the additional 200,000 in terms of the percentage on our undesignated fund. So he'll have that once we get to that resolution.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Supervisor Thais, you have a question? No question. Is there anyone else that has a question? Okay. Okay. Supervisor, you.
Back in our August 23rd county board meeting, we approved resolution 22-80, which was to provide $100,000 based on implementing a no left turn lane. And that was based on an initial estimate by Highway Commissioner Tad Ash. As part of his permitting and design process that he worked through with the state made put some additional requirements on that actually increases that amount to $200,000. Now, relative to the resolution that we did back in August, $100,000 is in the budget for next year. The question is, how do we manage this incremental $100,000 because of the increased requirements that the state is putting on us to still implement that important safety measure at that intersection? What would be the process to manage that? Thank you.
So Roy, you mind if I steal part of your thunder? So
We were going to address some of that concern later in the agenda under the minutes or reports, but an explanation as a budget.
sure. So as the supervisor mentioned, if you recall, we were working on the Gordon Road intersection. And part of that presentation or design that Thad put together was actually limiting the turning motion to the north. The ideal situation would have been is we got the drawings done, reviewed by DOT, and some of that work would have been done this year yet. Long story short, without pointing any fingers, we could not get DOT to agree on the design. So I don't know what else to do with that, but, and also with that design, they made some significant changes actually to the highway itself. Which actually is driving up that cost. So in essence, they're requiring us that we widen the highway. I guess heading south towards the roundabout. In other words, the traffic would turn on and there'd be like an acceleration lane that would be used. The exact cost impact of that, you know, Thad had an estimate about 100,000, but we still have to finalize all the concrete work, which we normally would bid that portion out. So we don't know what the exact fiscal amount is. So it's a great question that you're asking. So, and there's another part of this that's also kind of putting a twist in the mix. So the DOT is also going to apply for a special funding through the program. I forgot what it's called. I know Thad's online. I could ask him, or Thad, if you could type me a response of what the program is called while I'm talking. But in essence, they're actually going to put in for an application for a roundabout. So that application will go in, but we will not hear about that application until April. So in essence, we can't do the project now because it's too late in terms of the construction season. And we won't know what we're doing with if a roundabout's going to occur until April at the earliest. So in essence, we're kind of in a holding pattern. And really it's not so much a negative thing. So in terms of sequence, what we will do is we'll wait hopefully for a response from the grant itself in terms of the roundabout. If that is awarded, then it puts us in it's probably about a 3-year project before you actually see the roundabout. So the question then comes back to the county board is, do we want to spend 200,000 approximately as an interim fix until the roundabout's constructed, or do we wait? So that's a question for the county board. In either case, so let's say, or if the roundabout's not awarded, then obviously we'd like to move forward with the project. In either one of those cases, what I would recommend is that we leave the budget as it is right now. And that once we know which direction we're going in terms of those improvements, it'll also give Thad time to get better pricing for us at the time of construction. And then whatever that shortage is, we bring that back through the highway facilities and highways committee, and then the county board. And I guess there'd be 2 funding options at that point in time. One would be in our highway capital projects. There's a fund that they have. So for example, when we do projects like this year, we have $4 million budgeted, right? Well, that's our estimate. So if that's able, oil prices go down, but if we can get all that work done for 3.6, that $4 million, we have a $400,000 difference. Well, that sits in a highway fund at the county's discretion to use on future projects or to bring it back into our undesignated fund. So we could actually use the money from that account to pay for the offset of difference, or you could actually say, I want to take it from the undesignated fund. Since I don't have the exact cost of what those improvements are, we're just projecting. It really doesn't make sense in my mind to adjust the budget because I'm going to have to adjust it once we get the final numbers, probably in April or May. So that's why I'd recommend how we handle that.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Supervisor Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Meanwhile, we have a known dangerous intersection that we have the ability to put concrete barriers up and close that northbound lane. We talked about this at one of our last meetings, and our highway commissioner said we're gonna do it ourselves in November, and we're gonna, do the curbing and whatever and make it. And okay, so maybe there's some red tape with the DOT, but if there's an accident at that intersection and someone gets injured, I think it's on us. I think we know enough and we need to do something about it. I hope we can put the concrete barricades in place, as we know will work, and stop traffic turning left there. I don't know what we're waiting for.
Thad, if you're available, I'm going to make you a panelist so you can answer the question. I know part of the answer, but I'm trying to get Thad on so he's allowed to talk. And if that does not come on, there is an issue with the concrete barriers. In talking with the DOT, there's a liability issue of putting those barriers there. So for example, you get ice conditions or something like that, and now someone drives into that barrier. That's also on us from a liability standpoint. So the DOT did not approve that within their right of way in terms of those changes at this point in time. Now that might have changed. That's why I'm trying to get Thad in to the call. But that's where that stands in terms of that. So we exhausted some of those discussions with DOT in terms of what they're what they're allowing us to do in terms of living those movements. And right now it's kind of we have to wait until April is what we have in terms of solutions. So I know it's discussed both at highway safety and also our highway committee, but I don't know if Roy, if you'd like to add anything to that in terms of a comment or.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, any work that's going to be done there is going to be done in the state right away. And so the state does not want the county to create a condition where it's going to be worse than what we have right now. And that's why they came back and finally got the final approval to add a lane to the north side of the highway going toward the roundabout. And that's why the cost came up. And anything we do there would need state approval. And right now, they have not given any approval to make any temporary fix, so to speak, because it might create a worse hazard than we have right now. And that's the opinion that we were told recently.
If you don't mind, Thad.
No.
Thad, are you available? Can you, is your sound on? No, we're not getting your sound, Thad.
Okay, waiting while we wait
Yeah.
for Thad. Well, I don't want to go out of sequence here. Supervisor Anigal had a question before. Is it pertaining to this, or is Mr. Gunlickson's pertaining to this project?
Oh, can we
Okay.
just put him on speaker? If you don't mind, let's put him on speaker.
Okay.
All right, you're good to go.
Hello, the issue there is right now is the state is applying for a highway safety and improvement program. That's a HITSUP. It's the same as what they did for Stone Road and for County H. The issue we're having is we are not allowed by the state to do anything in the state right away without their permission. They will not allow concrete barriers in their right of way. Their right of way goes in approximately 12 to 15 feet into the intersection, into Gordon Road. So it's a ways off the highway where we'd have to do this. Their main concern is the acceleration lane off of that heading south and people turning left out of the right turn lane. So what they're asking to do is put delineators down the line, the edge line of the road heading south to keep the cars going south. And in order to do that, we have to pave an acceleration lane for 200 feet. And at this point, with everybody's hot mix plant closed down and with concrete plants, shortage of powder, and the contractors who can do curbing booked till freeze up, to open that up and leave a gravel lane for cars to travel on is only asking trouble. So in trying to improve a hazard, we don't want to create another hazard. I myself am very disappointed in the response we've gotten from the state on it. The timelines that we had were more than enough. Each time they brought a plan, we brought a plan to them, they came back with extras. And the other side of it is if we do any type of an improvement there, they cannot ask for their grant till 5 years after an improvement. So that is kind of the reason of waiting till they can apply in February. They'll know in April on their grant. And at that point, I am at this point trying to be prepared to either on the decision of the board to continue with our plan and go with what we have to do, or to hold off in regards to what the state is doing. My opinion, we still need to do something in the interim. But what we can safely do still has to be approved by the state to allow us to do it within their right-of-way limits.
Okay, there's a lot of information here being presented on that potential project. But I think the important thing to remember here is that there's money in that budget to do some work. There's places to get it out of the current budget. And that's what we're addressing that part today. And those decisions as to what gets done at that intersection will happen in the next month or two or in springtime when we hear from the DOT. So Supervisor Anikel, you had a question.
So, since we have broken out of the budget comment, this is not referencing the budget itself, but rather the conversation. I'm hoping Thad still hears this. As a person that drives the two roundabouts today routinely and is tired of basically fighting out of getting out of that roundabout with another person in the other lane, I hope somebody makes that roundabout going north if they put two lanes in, one is clearly designated a left turn only lane and the other one is to go around. I'm tired of having to deal with a car side by side with me that is late on a Friday trying to get to their cottage, even though I was the one in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand the way the two roundabouts are done now. I don't want to see this roundabout built the same way.
Well, if the state decides to proceed with any
My
effort
comments
in
are
that-
basically
in
to
that-
say, please bring that forward to
Yeah.
those
There
individuals
will be a-
because I can't stand the
I
way
believe
that
there
one is
will
set
be a
up.
public hearing on the roundabouts, and that's an issue when that comes up. So back to the budget. Joel, did you have a question?
All the time.
Okay. Okay,
Thank you.
here. Thank you. Okay, I guess I would make one comment, and I can't give you an absolute explanation, but in regards to the equalized that the state provides, their level of equalized is regardless of where the town is at. The local assessor puts values, but the state is the one that determines the level of equalized and then says, if you're out of compliance, that you have to bring it up to plus or minus 10%, generally trying to arrive at that 100% value. And in my experience, many years ago as an assessor, our town was down to about 20 or 25%. Those levels do not represent a market value. The taxpayer doesn't understand what those numbers are all about, and changing it from the low level to 100% or market value. And I think that's where the rules came about, requiring the towns to be in so-called compliance. And if a town is below, I thought it was 90%, for 2 years, the state will require a reval being done. And so, but the state is, the DOR is the agency that determines that level of equalized for each of the municipalities based on sales. So I don't know if that's helpful or not. Many years ago, the DOR would actually send a rep to the county boards and give an explanation of how they arrive at things, because that apportionment affects what goes to the schools, to the NWTC and so forth. So, okay, any other discussion on the budget? Okay, hearing none, then we can reconvene as the county board and act on other matters on our agenda. So pending business, there was nothing listed. Yeah, we could probably take a break before we, could we take a 10-minute break before we get into the budget and tax levy and the other resolutions? Let's be back at 10:25. Thank you, Brad. Resolutions. The first resolution up would be Resolution 2022-96 for our county budget and tax levy. And I will make a motion to approve that resolution with a tax levy of $30,691,035. Is there a second to that? There is a second by Rubelard. Okay, we're open for discussion. Supervisor Shulman,
I would like to make a motion to amend resolution 2022-96 to have the 1.2 million cost of rural address signs come from an undesignated funds and return the $200,000 to the ARPA funding reserve.
okay, is there a second to that?
Yeah.
Okay, a second by Supervisor Boltman. Okay, discussion on that amendment. I think we got an explanation from Ken on that before. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The only thing I wanted to add to that is that the account of the sheet we were handed of the ARPA allocations, which is the reasoning to want to do this. They're under the initiatives and reserves, health and human services, grants to nonprofits, $200,000 was taken out of the reserve, which there's still 300,000 remaining after that. And of that $200,000, we've had over $500,000 worth of grant applications. So there's definitely interest. I'm not saying that those all would be chosen or would qualify, but it isn't just a case where we've had no applications, which is one of the reasons I'd like to see that money go back to the reserve. Knowing that still would not, it's not saying it would go to that grant program. I know that's a decision for the future, but it's showing a need. Thank you.
Okay. Who else here? Okay, Supervisor Boltman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the advertising, addressing project is important. I just think the money should come from the general fund. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments to the amendment? Seeing none, we'll call for the question. All those in favor of the question?
I know, but does that have to be 2/3 because we're changing money, you know? Or just majority?
No, not we're adopting the budget.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
yeah, we're voters, board of bars.
Oh, sure. Steve has that.
So with that, before the change of, if you look at from the unassigned fund balance spreadsheet that it's always in your packet. The change before with adding the 2,000 from the to the undesignated fund was at 22.91%. Now with adding another 200,000 coming from the undesignated changes that percentage to 22.6%. So now remember that the percentage is from 12 to 15%. So you just got to be careful that no other emergency projects come in within 2023.
Okay, Vinnie?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't, is that, I don't know if we're voting or calling the question. I just,
Started calling for a question and there was further
okay, I said a question
discussion,
on
but
that.
okay, if you have a question for
Okay,
Steve.
so 15% where it would be at 22 now. Could you just clarify that a little bit? And then you said, but no other emergency spending. I'm just trying to see how that compares.
What our resolution states is that our undesignated fund should not get actually below that 12%. It should be within that 12 to 15%. Okay.
Yeah.
Right now in 2022, as of, again, be about the same, we're at 38% currently right now. Okay. Now, when we change, because the calculation changes because of the expenditures for those that qualify for tax levy. And so that calculation changes. So now going from 38% right now, it will go down to 22%, 22.6% with this change added. Now, again, if there's something happens throughout 2023 and there's an emergency and we need to have some funds from somewhere, this might be one of the first spots where we might ask for, and it might get below that percentage. So does that answer your question to where we're at?
I think it was just, it doesn't go from 38 to 22 because of taking.
No, 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 no,
$200,000
no, no, no,
out, right?
no, no, no,
Okay.
no, no.
That's like less
No,
than
no,
1%
correct.
difference, right?
So
Okay.
no, so before,
Yeah.
before the $200,000 change with, when we makes, was at 22.9%.
Yeah.
With the change to adding the 200,000 from the undesignated fund, we'll change it to 22.6%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Austin.
What's the recommendation of the staff on this motion?
You're putting me on this.
You're putting us on a-
Which,
Well, the two being gone.
Okay, I'm just gonna answer from a financial perspective, not on the ARPA funds and the grants and stuff like that. Just from a financial perspective. Again, I think the big thing to understand is that the calculation changes. So a lot of people said that 38%, we have all this money, we gotta draw it down. I guess what Steve's trying to say is that based off of how we're doing our spending and how the program's put together, it's not like we're just sitting on a pile of money. So that's all we're trying to say. Is there surplus funds there? Yes. Is it 200,000 adjustment from a financial standpoint? That is fine. But again, the thing that it does is it does put that money back into the ARPA funding, which is good. But now we just got to have that discussion of how we want to use those funds. So, but from a financial standpoint, it does not. We're not going to, Steve and I won't lose sleep out of it. It's just, we'll probably lose more sleep on how we think we're going to use those dollars, to be honest. So.
I guess as Chair of Finance, I could maybe address that a little bit too, that it was discussed, I'd say almost multiple times at Finance, how the ARPA funds would be used, should they be used for nonprofits? That's been back and forth. Ended up that some money was going that way, but from the very beginning, I think there was always some money from ARPA that was probably going towards the signs, and we decided to leave some money in. Okay, anyone else? Otherwise, I had started asking for the vote on this. We will vote via the voting board. All those in favor of them?
voting board. Voting board.
Voting board.
Okay,
So again, you're voting on the amendment right now.
yes, on
Just
the amendment. Just the amendment. Asking to remove the $200,000 from the ARPA funds and replace for the signs, replacing it with money from the reserve. Okay, all those in favor of them? Well,
No, you have to push your button.
I'm the only one that hasn't voted? Talking too much? Okay. Okay, so the amendment was defeated by a vote of 9-11. Okay, we're back to the original motion and to approve the budget and levy as presented. Any other questions, correct, additions or concerns? Seeing no indication, we'll ask for a vote on that via the voter board. Claire, we need a vote from you, please. Okay. Okay, the vote on the budget is passed, 20 yes and 0 no, with 1 absent.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, before we move on, I would like to say a special thanks again to the department heads, obviously the county board for the time you put in during the retreat and all the review process. But also I'd like to give recognition to Steve and all his work that he put together, multiple areas and multiple budgets. So I just appreciate the support in the team that I have. And it's really is a group effort. So I'd like to recognize everyone for their efforts. Thank you for that.
And I would like to recognize Joanne Ballman in my department too, as well. She put some time in putting this budget book together and everything too. So thank you.
Okay, next would be resolution 2022-97. Roy, would you introduce that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve resolution number 2022-97 for the approval of land lease agreement with the Sturgeon Bay Utilities Biosolid Storage Facility at the 020445000001 at our property, which is the landfill.
Okay, is someone from the utilities here then that would like to? Okay, someone representing the utilities is here to,
Yes, Jim is here from the utilities. I can speak a little bit about this, is that this has been in process for over 3 years with the highway department. And so the corporate counsel has written up the lease, and it's I'll ask Jim to give us a little bit more specifics for the utility. Jim.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Jim Stowicki, General Manager of Sturgeon Bay Utilities. I know this has been running through a number of the county committees. Appreciate working with them and the opportunity to work intergovernmentally. Sturgeon Bay Utilities is a regional processor of waste for Door County. Domestically, certainly within the corporate boundaries, we have a collection system, but we also collect over 30 million gallons of waste from haulers throughout the county. Once beyond that, the biosolids from every Door County community winds up at our facility also. The biosolids that we produce are exceptional quality, Class A biosolid. Sounds kind of funny when you're talking about biosolids, but that's what the DNR refers to it as. So it's really inert. There are some beneficial qualities to this. Over the years, I think over the last 10 years, we've worked with 3 different entities as far as storage and spreading of this material. We need a more permanent solution, frankly, and working with Door County makes just a lot of sense here. You see the drawings, we'll put a facility next to the landfill. It's an impacted area already, fenced in. The cooperative effort should work well for everyone. And as I mentioned, this is beneficial to, frankly, every taxpayer, every citizen of our county. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We do have approval through the DNR to move forward with this. Once we have a lease in place with the county, we will be holding a public hearing also through Sturgeon Bay Utilities.
okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Stowicki? Okay. Supervisor Boltman?
Oh, I guess I did push the button earlier. You pretty much answered. I was mostly looking for an overview. Can you just review the first few things you said? Did you say that Sturgeon Bay Utilities ends up getting biosolids from all of the treatment facilities in the county?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they're biosolids in addition to about 1 million gallons of leachate from the county from the landfill itself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and Supervisor Enical.
Yeah, page 23 of the packet, item number 11, removal and restoration at end of term. Curiosity, if I'm reading this correctly, there's no option to retain the building as a county structure. Am I missing something somewhere else in the documents? Not to say that after the number of years it's a value building, but to me, it looks, acts and feels like it's intended that must be removed, period.
You care to address that concern or? is it-
I'd be more interested out of the corp council.
Yeah,
I don't know if the agreement addresses it. It probably would be subsequent negotiation at the time, that if they were going to take it down and the county said, you guys don't want this facility, we would take it off your hands, that you'd have a negotiation at that point. But I don't know that the agreement addresses that situation specifically.
Is, just as contracts are written, you want to follow it, right? There's no opening in there, in my opinion, to have that option.
but there's no contribution from the county towards the building.
Correct, but this is for basically as written, it states it must be removed. And usually we have in our contracts, we have some caveat there saying that a mutually agreeable understanding may come along. We're able to maintain and keep it. But that's only my comment. It's not a no vote on me. I'm just curious why it's not there.
Sure. Probably just didn't come up in our discussion. I can't remember an answer for that.
Okay.
Our intent would be for it to be there for 100 years possibly. So
I understand the intent, but I've been on this board and other boards long enough to know that. And many of you have been here when I made the comment, well, what did the original board intend based on the verbiage that was used? And that's all I'm asking, because historically we'll see that kind of a caveat put in there, and this time it's not there.
And I don't know that, I mean, it could be a discussion, but I don't know that utilities would be opposed to that if they no longer had a use
Oh,
for it.
Right.
We could add a provision in.
Or the expense to remove it, they'd be happy not to spend the money either at the same token, if it's of any value to the county.
We'd certainly be amenable to language of that sort if
Yeah.
you want to make that change.
Okay, we could proceed with this and have that point of discussion for you. further
Sure,
if
you
it's
could
needed,
approve a condition on that language being added.
if necessary.
Mhm.
Okay. Vinnie?
One question I had, is there, if it's 100 years or however long, is there any like land remediation that has to be done because of the use of the site when the use ends? Like similar to the landfill, we've had a long time of recouping that land or taking care of the leachate from that, even though the landfill is not in use. So this facility, once it's not in use, do we have to take out the drain tile that's collecting the leachate, or is there any remediation we have to do?
If there would be any, it would be on utilities to perform.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, seeing no. Mr. Gunlickson.
Regarding the opposite, whether or not it needs to come down in 100 years, is there enough adequate land and location of this where it can be expanded onto? If the amount of waste goes up in the coming years on the property?
I don't know,
Well,
because I don't have enough technical information about expanding a facility like this.
The option there is, yes, there is enough space, but the option is also to spread more frequently. Of course, you can't do that during the winter months.
Right.
We are oversizing it to begin with, just so you're aware of that.
I believe you worked with our soil and water department in developing this, and so I would think they've looked at every feasible option and.
I will say county staff was great to work with on this
Okay,
project.
thank you. Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll go to the voter board on this one, please.
Sorry. Hold on. My fault.
And a yes vote is to approve the agreement with Sturgeon Bay Utilities. That passes on a vote of 20 yes and 0 no's with 1 absent. Okay. The WLIP grant application. It's 2022-98 resolution. Supervisor Enical, would you present that one, please?
This is an annual application basically for funds from the state. It's more complicated than it seems like it needs to be. But we go through this every year for applying for the grant monies that are available for that department to be used through different projects, and it's an update to. Don't know what else to say.
Okay. Any questions from any of the supervisors? Otherwise, we have the motion by Enical, the second by Norton to approve resolution 2022-98. And we'll go to the voter board on that also. And that also passes on a vote of 20 yes and 0 no with 1 absent. Okay, that concludes our resolutions. Nope, one more. Okay. Boy, I'm shortchanging the highway department. Roy, would you introduce resolution 2022-99?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I move to approve resolution 2022-99, authorize the purchase of equipment, highway and airport department. That's been in the budget. It's been included in the budget, and this is just a formal way of approving what the county highway department wishes to purchase in 2023.
Okay, any questions on the equipment that's being replaced? Okay, hearing no request for any comments. On a motion from Roy Engelbert and a second by Elizabeth Gauger to approve the resolution 2022-99. We'll go to the voter board for this also, and we need a 2/3 vote on this one. It also passes on a vote of 20 yes and 0 no with 1 abstention. Now we could proceed to this state statute 59.11 parentheses 1 of the Wisconsin statutes for the annual meeting, which is just an opportunity to comment to the rules of order and organization and the rules governing the Door County Board of Supervisors and the duties of the committees and so forth. I think as presented, it's the same as we had back in April, and there's no request for any further discussion, but if there's any interest in making some sort of change, it could be addressed at upcoming meeting or deferred to the annual meeting in April.
Cap meets every month, not every other month. Unfortunately.
Okay, so that's the change now that they're meeting more often,
Yeah.
and it's just a correction to those committee responsibilities. Okay, Supervisor Boltman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would encourage my fellow supervisors to look at page 55 of our packet on number 7, organizational meeting agenda, point 8, regarding the committee on committees. We made a change this spring to consolidate committees. And while there's arguably benefits to that, I think we have to be aware of the possible drawbacks. And one of the things that it was interesting to learn from some other counties when we were at convention this September is that sometimes some counties, the committee on committees is elected. And that potentially gives a broader voice to help decide the chair of, who's chairing the committees. And in the past, when we had many or more committees, there was more opportunity for leadership to be spread among supervisors. And now that has been limited a lot. And again, I see that as one of the downfalls or one of the, not positive things from the going to the consolidation that we did. Not that in the law, and it got voted, we're doing it, it's working. I think we have to kind of stay aware of like what other shifts might have to happen to keep things sort of equal and fair and democratic. And I would argue that the committee on committees should be elected, not appointed by the chair. And if anyone else wants to comment on that, I'm open to, I think it's a good discussion to have, or at least at the very least to keep in mind for the future. Maybe we'll go down the road and everything's hunky-dory, no problem. But there's definitely been a consolidation or there is a potential for consolidation of power in a way that I think could negatively affect how this body functions. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's an item that I could refer to Chairman Lino when he returns, and it could be addressed at the administrative meeting level. And this would be for his consideration. So anyone else wishing to comment on anything? Okay, Supervisor Amical.
I'll reiterate what I said about this changing to committees. I have become less informed. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So that's a comment on the total consolidation of committees. Okay. We'll note that as well. Okay. We'll go to ordinances. There's nothing under ordinances, nothing under new business. The oral committee reports. I asked Roy, maybe he could add a little bit to what's going with the Gordon Road and State.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I just would like to review. Yes, we had some good discussion earlier on County Road BB and Highway 4257 junction. You may not know that the DOT is planning to resurface that portion from the Mill Road down to the bridge in 2023. That's going to happen. You also heard some conversation as far as what may happen as far as what our safety department at the DOT is doing as far as applying for a grant to do a roundabout at the junction of County Road BB and Highway 4257. And that we won't know about that until April of 2023 or possibly later. However, if that should be approved, that wouldn't be constructed on earliest until 2026. That would be the same time as the fixing the J turns on Highway H and 57 and Stone Road at 57. So that's would be the earliest. So I want to assure you that your highway commissioner has worked very diligently trying to get an answer, and he was very positive as trying to fix that in 2022. However, he has run into several roadblocks and could not get the final approval for doing a right turn only until it was too late in the season. So we as a board next year will have to make a decision whether we want to go ahead with that right turn only improvement and spend the money with the idea that it might only be there for 3 years before it gets torn up and fixed with a roundabout if that should happen. So that's in the future. So those are things we need to concern. We won't be talking about this on our highway committee or the safety committee again until spring of 2023.
I believe also that that had indicated an attempt to try to educate the public more on how people deal with the intersection and use of the roundabout.
That's correct, because over 80% of all those accidents are caused by Door County citizens and involved in local people. And we try to educate. We putting up more. There's more signage involved as far as putting strips on the stop signs ahead of time to make it more visible. We're trying to do that, and anybody in that know realizes that a right turn gets you on going north faster than making a left turn at that intersection.
Supervisor Boltman.
You're not on.
I'm not. No. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it is frustrating. I appreciate Thad's, I don't know if he's still listening, but the update and in your report as well, Supervisor Engelbert. I wonder if I know we had talked about signage on BB on Gordon Road. So that would be eastbound heading towards the intersection, encouraging people to turn right at that road to get them down to the roundabout, like what we would suggest people do. Is that signage possibly in the works at the very least? I mean, as far as that would go along with us trying to educate ourselves better, I guess, or anybody who uses that road. I mean, we talked about that signage encouraging people to turn right, west of Culver's there to get down, basically almost using that as like a frontage road. We talked about that happening. Is that, I mean, we can still do that signage because that's not state highway right away, right? We could do that. Is that in the works? I mean, I think we should. I saw this morning there were orange flags on all the stop signs. So, okay, that's great. I mean, I think that's, I think we need to be doing everything we can. And I realized, again, learning today how frustrating it is that the state keeps throwing another hurdle in front of us when Mr. Ash had a plan and then they said, no, it's got to be better. And then he came up with a better plan. And then they said, no, now we got this new hurdle. I understand that Representative Kitchens and Senator Jock are up to speed with this issue and actually might be responsible for helping at least get the roundabout study for this, pushing that forward, because before the DOT was saying, oh, that's not even an option for you for the next, decade or whatever. So again, I think whatever we can do, I think we should be doing, and I hope there's some signage in the works. So maybe you could take that to the highway, committee that, because we had talked about signage on eastbound County BB turning right west of Culver's to keep that intersection traffic to a minimum. So if we can at least somehow come up with signage that encourages that, at least I think, again, until the DOT can figure out what they need to figure out. I don't know. Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Austin.
Yeah, you said, Roy, that we aren't going to do anything till next spring to make a decision on roundabout. Shouldn't we right now be lobbying, however they do it, to get on the list for a roundabout instead of waiting for them to make a decision? Should we be putting the pressure on them now, the county board, to get a roundabout of the commission that makes a decision, start lobbying them to give us the roundabout, starting now?
They are going to make a request.
Correct, but shouldn't we be lobbying the group, whoever they make a request to?
I think there's, just for clarification, so again, now this, what's going in February, what they're working on is under a special program for funding. So if we didn't get that, then you go back to your traditional, I guess, project request into the DOT. So I'd say yes, after April, if this would not proceed, I think you could put that into the queue. But the only thing I can say with that is that queue is even out further. So, but if it fails, that's something that we can put on, but you're probably looking at 10+ years to get on that other project list for improvements, so.
Okay, Supervisor Resnick.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so just to clarify, this grant that we are applying for, is this a competitive grant, or is this something that, there's a lot of people applying? Is it something we're guaranteed? And what happens if we don't get it? Like, are we back to square one? Like, what are the parameters of what the state will allow us to do now? Because even if we get the grant, 2026 is a long time away.
Yep.
And there's a lot of traffic on those roads. There's the daycare coming on that road. Like, something has to be done in some capacity. So what are we allowed to do?
Right, so again, they're putting in the application. This is actually under a special improvement program for what they consider areas of concern. So that's where the grant application is going in for that program. Again, if we do not get it in April, then it falls back to our level in terms of now implementing the design that has now approved from DOT. And we'd have to address the shortage of funding for that, but that has that ready to go. So if we weren't awarded, we'd be ready to go with that project in May.
Okay.
Even if we are awarded, we still have a decision point of if we want to do anything for that 3-year window. But I think that'll be discussed, and I think there's got to be some discussions with DOT if they'll allow that to happen as well, just because the improvement being made and how that grant program works. So we have to work out some of those details yet, but that's all, I guess, in the works. But we do have, I guess right now, we do have an approved, right now we have an approved plan that we could proceed with in the first part of the year from DOT, unless they would change something on us.
Cool. And then one more question, I guess, I'm not sure who would answer this, but what is the actual disconnect between the DOT that they won't address this? Like, is it not deadly enough? Are there not enough crashes? Like, what is the litmus that it's not enough for them if our whole community is begging?
Sure, go ahead, Sean.
DOT has informed us that they don't have a criteria where so many deaths equal a roundabout, but the more dangerous the intersection is, the more seriously they take a look at correcting the intersection. We did have a recent accident there, and it's my speculation that prompted them to now all of a sudden submit a grant application for funds to put in a roundabout at that intersection. Thad had alluded to a little early about this grant application, that if we would construct something before we know whether we receive that grant, it would push out our ability to apply for that grant again for 5 years. And there's also a multi-year engineering and implementation study. So we could be talking, if we would do anything in that area that would offend this grant application, pushing out a potential roundabout 9-10 years down the road, which is why I think that it's important to wait, even though we do know it's a concern, to see if we do get the grant funding for roundabout, because that seems to be a better fix than a right turn only for northbound traffic.
Okay, Supervisor Morgan.
That intersection is currently on a watch list, correct? Is the verbiage in the grant, is the designation of the intersection in the verbiage of the grant? Say, instead of being on a watch list, can that be elevated to a more urgent concern in the verbiage of the grant so that they realize that this grant money would be used, well, and should be looked at more seriously? Or
I don't.
You know, the
Sorry.
answer.
Yeah.
This is a grant by DOT, so we haven't seen the grant. I haven't seen the grant language, but it is something that they're applying for this intersection. It's not the county, is my understanding, applying for.
Right,
for the grant.
correct, but to Supervisor Austin's point, is there conversation that can be had with the DOT to elevate the level to instead of it being on a watch list, to it being an actual concern or whatever the next level up is, so that within that grant verbiage, it's the importance of it is
Yeah.
a little more realistic.
In general, the reclassification probably wouldn't happen for that grant, but what they are doing is that each year DOT collects yearly data. And obviously, so in Thad's discussions, and he reported this at the highway committee, at right now, they're looking at 22 data, which is based off 21. So that intersection doesn't get reclassified to a higher level of concern. Now that we had those unfortunate accidents this year, at the end of the year, now they'll take that new data and rerun their model. And they'll do that across the state, and it will fall in a ranking in terms of priority intersections, in terms of, so again, under the grant that we're going for, that's a special program, but in terms of the classification of the severity of that intersection for other grants and other programs, will be based off those new calculations and analysis.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Zettel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the leadership of the Highway Commissioner Thad Ash and also Roy Engelbert for teeing this up at the August Highway Commission meeting and their diligent efforts to try to get this problem resolved. So thank you to both of them. At that Highway Commission Safety Commission meeting in August, the gentleman from the DOT that was discussing the roundabout had indicated that one of the challenges with a roundabout is the fact that they're going to have to do land acquisition in order to do that. And I believe he stated that land acquisition takes somewhere between 4 to 5 years. So to me, unless there is something else that is advantageous, we're looking at something that's, 2027, 2028 potentially, along with some of the other design challenges since the culvert's got to be replaced and some other things by Big Creek. So I think 2026, quite honestly, is optimistic in my point. And I think like gravity, these sorts of things, shift to the right in terms of a timeline. It just, happens with the entropy of these sorts of things. So I would suggest, that we take that other challenges from a timeline perspective from the state into consideration when we reconsider this again next spring. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Schober.
Thank you. I just had a question, and I haven't followed this close enough, I do admit, but is there any look at reducing the speed limit to just in that section as a temporary option? Sorry, you're laughing, but well, I mean, I guess that's not my spot to say. I just wondered if that reduction of speed at that intersection would help in the interim of, it looks like 3 to 4 years.
Roy, has there been some discussion on that?
That's not our area that we can dictate. It is a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit right now on Highway 4257. And so whether the DOT would ever entertain going below that, I have no idea. But, it's supposed to be 45 right now.
65 between the two roundabouts now. Come on.
Okay, Supervisor Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just following on Supervisor Zettel's comments. So just to clarify for this body and for our constituents, it sounds like, so clarify or clear me, correct me if I'm wrong, that in spring we'll have some answers as far as a path. At the very least, we can be part of this repaving that's happening and put in that acceleration lane to the south. And we can shut down the northbound turn and limit that with this repaving that's happening before the tourist season, right? Correct? That can happen at the very least. And then we can hope that whatever future plans or better improvements come down the pike. But basically what I'm getting at is we're fairly assured that there's something happening by the tourist season next spring or next July, June, July.
I think that's the takeaway we need from this meeting
Okay,
is
that's
that
kind of what I'm trying to.
the highway commissioner and the highway committee are going to be working with the DOT on getting approved what's ever the most advantageous to us. And we'll come back to the county board
Okay,
to decide how we want to proceed.
thank you for the clarification.
So. Okay. I think that's about all we can do with that topic today. It's not really a whole agenda item for us and can be in the future. Okay, we have oral committee reports. That's what we just dealt with. Review of the committee minutes. Review of vouchers, claims and bills. There's no questions on those. The next county board meeting is to be determined in December. Is there a suggested date for that? The 20th? The 20th?
Yes.
Okay. The 20th at 10 a.m.
December 20th at 10 a.m.
Okay. So could we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Norton, second by Resnick. All those in favor of adjourning signify by aye. Opposed? Thank you.